In the early months of 2025, the world's most dangerous drug cartels learned that nowhere was truly safe. Deep in the Pacific, a U.S. Navy warship tracked a floating drug lab worth millions, its location betrayed by a web of intelligence and high-tech surveillance. What followed was swift, precise, and devastating, leaving nothing but smoke and scattered debris on the waves. This is the story of how a cartel drug lab was wiped off the map by the U.S. Navy strike. In early 2025, one ship instilled fear in drug lords. For 112 days, the USCGC James, a Legend-class cutter and the fifth of its kind, prowled the eastern Pacific like a steel shadow. It wasn't a single dramatic chase on TV. It was a steady, grinding push. Planes up early, drones buzzing the horizon, speedboats slicing the waves, and crews watching screens in the dark until the job was done. The James is built for this. On its deck sits a 57mm gun and a phalanx close-in weapon system. There are multiple 50 caliber and 7.62mm machine guns ready to fire, and room below decks for future upgrades. Mine warfare gear, non-line-of-sight missiles, and even the option to swap the phalanx for a CRAM system. It's a cutter designed not just to sail, but to change the rules of the fight. The mission read like a relay of precision. Surveillance planes and thermal imagers would spot suspicious wakes miles offshore. Drones would move in to get eyes on suspect boats. The cutter and its smaller craft would close fast. In these operations, the crews used every tool they had: drones, aircraft, ships, thermal cameras, and speedy intercept boats. And sometimes the results came all at once. Across runs off the coasts of Peru, Ecuador, and near the Galapagos Islands, crews reported a string of victories. On January 5th, a long-endurance maritime drone climbed a patrol height and locked onto a lone smuggler off Ecuador. These Coast Guard drones can fly for 18 hours and carry cameras sharp enough to read a boat's name from miles away. The drone watched the suspect while the crew planned a quiet intercept. When boarding teams moved in, they found 3 men and 2,250 pounds of cocaine hidden aboard. That small strike set the tone. Tiny signs, huge payoff. The next day, January 6th, the operation escalated. Patrol aircraft spotted 3 go-fast boats racing in formation. Risky for the smugglers, bold for the cutters. Helicopter crews and the James's team synchronized like a clock. The helicopters cut off escape routes while small boats closed in. In the end, all 3 boats were stopped. 9 suspects were arrested, and the haul totaled 13,960 pounds of cocaine. It was one of those rare, clean wins where technology, timing, and courage matched up. On January 7th, the smugglers tried a different trick. A low-profile boat built to slip past radar. But Hytron, the helicopter interdiction crew, was ready. Instead of shooting to kill, they used precision shots to put the engines out of commission, leaving the vessel dead in the water. The crew was detained unharmed, and another 8,240 pounds of cocaine was taken off the map. Smugglers refused to quit. On January 18th, when they tried to dump contraband to lighten their load, the James didn't relent. Its high-speed pursuit boats chased down the suspects while tech teams scooped floating bales from the sea. Recovering nearly 6,000 pounds of cocaine from choppy water is ugly, cold work. Crews risked hypothermia, reefed through oil and salt, and hauled soggy bales aboard. But those bales meant millions lost to the cartels and lives potentially spared on the streets. Taken together, these days show a clear pattern: surveillance that never blinks, helicopters that hit their mark, and boarding teams who do the dangerous work up close. Official tallies in the mission mention drugs seized in 13 interdictions in the Eastern Pacific, while a later offload on March 20th totaled nearly 46,000 pounds taken in 14 interdictions. The numbers jump around because the action was constant and reports were updated as cases closed. What's clear is the size of the haul: almost 45,000 pounds of pure uncut cocaine, plus roughly 3,800 pounds of marijuana, drugs valued at more than $517.5 million. Across the missions, 34 suspected smugglers were taken into custody. In one sweep, more than a dozen suspects were detained after 6 separate interdictions. For families, towns, and communities back home, the Coast Guard framed the math in stark human terms. This seizure could mean hundreds of lives spared from the grip of addiction and thousands fewer people exposed to pure cocaine on U.S. streets. Top law enforcement voices put the mission in even sharper terms. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi said what the crews did saved countless American lives and warned that the cocaine intercepted on those seas would otherwise have been distributed across the country, maybe even the world. Officials tied many of the shipments back to powerful cartels, naming the Jalisco New Generation and Sinaloa groups as heavily tied to these runs. Briefly, the cartel's playbook looks familiar. Fast boats, hidden compartments, rendezvous points far from shore, and a brutal next man up culture that has kept the flow moving for years. That next man up idea is exactly what the strike aimed to break. Officials in the mission rhetoric promised a hard line. The traffickers were being treated less like organized crime and more like foreign terrorists in a way that would strip them of their freedom to roam. Voices in the administration vowed to lock these networks down, to remove the safety nets that let a new boss step in and pick up where another left off. The public math officials used was blunt and meant to land. When authorities said over $500 million in illegal drugs were interdicted at sea, they didn't only mean dollars. They argued that the figure equated to lives not lost to overdose, users not introduced to cocaine, and real savings in health and incarceration costs. One calculation cited from the mission estimated 154 lives saved directly from cocaine-related overdose deaths, nearly 11,000 fewer new cocaine users, and around $16.5 million avoided in inmate care and health expenses. Those are big claims, and they are the kind that make a mission feel like more than a headline. They make it feel like an intervention with long, measurable effects. On deck, the work was simpler and grittier. Sailors studied radar blips and night vision screens. Pilots timed intercepts, and small boat crews executed the dangerous leap from cutter to target. For cartel crews on those suspect boats, the James and its partners became a nightmare. Drones and aircraft moved silently. Teams closed in. Evidence and drugs were seized. Men were handcuffed. Boats were scuttled or turned over. The sea, for a time, did not belong to the smugglers. A string of interdictions, a mountain of contraband, and dozens of arrests didn't finish the job. Cartels adapt. But the cutter James did not work alone. Backing the cutter every step of the way was the USCG Mohawk, a 270-foot medium-endurance cutter that brought a different kind of muscle to the hunt. While the James carried long-reach, high-tech sensors and aerial assets, the Mohawk filled gaps with steady seamanship, hands-on law enforcement, and a crew trained to do many jobs at once. Home-ported in Key West, the Mohawk is built for long patrols and quick pivots. One day it might hunt a smuggler, the next it could pull a survivor from choppy water or run a joint exercise with allied ships. That multi-mission mindset mattered. Interdiction in the Eastern Pacific often requires more than speed or eyes in the sky. Mohawk boarding teams softened targets up close, searching hidden holds, processing evidence, and taking suspects into custody. Their steady presence let the James keep planes and drones focused on new threats farther out. The Mohawk also brought international reach. Its crews worked with partner navies and coast guards to share intelligence and coordinate patrols, closing gaps that traffickers once exploited. Those partnerships turned isolated strikes into a sustained squeeze, making routes riskier and plans harder to hide. At sea, the two cutters made a simple, effective pair. Different tools, same goal. The James could spot a runner miles away and push the chase. The Mohawk could climb aboard, secure the scene, and handle the paperwork and people that follow. Planes overhead, cutters on scene, and boarding teams clearing boats. The layers of effort built a net that was hard to escape. For smugglers used to slipping past one patrol at a time, the combination was brutal, patient, persistent, and precise. Their teamwork sent a clear message. The sea was no longer a safe route. It bought time for law enforcement ashore to follow leads effectively. The strikes hit the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels hard, but the sea work was only one part of the fight. What pulled all the pieces together sat quietly in Key West, GEMIATF South. Think of it as a brains and tools hub where the U.S. and partner nations turn loose pieces of information into real-world arrests. JIATF isn't dramatic in the movie sense. It looks ordinary from the street. Inside, though, it hums like a machine. Analysts watch screens filled with maps. They read satellite photos, radar tracks, and ship transponders. They pore over phone data and tip lines. Bits of data from customs, foreign navies, and undercover agents arrive in the same room. That is its power. Everything sits next to everything else, so patterns jump out fast. When a pattern appears, JIATF does two things at once. First, it predicts. Using years of case files and computer models, analysts make heat maps that show where smugglers will likely try to move next. Those maps are gold. They let the Coast Guard and Navy position cutters, planes, and helicopters in the best spots, sometimes days before a run even begins. Second, JIATF acts. It can task ships and aircraft directly. That speed matters. Drug boats can disappear in minutes once they see they've been found. One of JIATF's smartest moves is putting lead-at teams on Navy ships. These are small groups of Coast Guard law enforcement experts who can board a boat and make arrests. The Navy brings big sensors and long legs at sea. The Coast Guard brings the legal authority to take criminals off ships. Together, they work like a tag team. Navy finds, Coast Guard finishes. The intelligence from these sea fights does more than stop loads. It fingerprints and networks. Every arrest, every radio intercept, every seized phone can point to bosses inland. Analysts trace payment routes, identify safe houses, and map who meets whom. With that work, prosecutors can build cases that reach past low-level smugglers to the people who organize the runs. International partners are vital too. JIATF shares leads with law enforcement in South America, Europe, and beyond. Those partners help close ports, arrest brokers, and follow the money. Trafficking is global. Fighting it must be global as well. This whole system, drones spotting wakes, destroyers scanning with long-range radar, cutters closing fast, lead-at teams boarding, and analysts knitting data together in Key West, creates pressure the cartels didn't expect. Routes that worked for years become risky. Trusted runners get caught. Payment chains fray. That is the point. Break the flow so the cartels can't simply replace one busted crew with the next man up. Does that end the traffickers? Number cartels adapt. But JIATF's approach turns short-term wins into long-term headaches for them. Every seized shipment and every arrested mid-level operator adds to the evidence piles that can reach deeper into cartel hierarchies. Heat maps guide the next patrol. Intelligence points to the next arrest. And the cycle goes on. The drug war at sea is messier and stranger than most people think. It is not just fast boats and hidden holds. It now includes real working submarines. Crude, clever, and terrifyingly effective. These vessels can slip under the waves and carry loads worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That makes them worth the huge risks the traffickers take. This did not come from nowhere. Back in the 1980s, smugglers towed simple tubes behind boats. It was clever but crude. By the 1990s, those tubes evolved into self-powered subs built in jungle workshops. Picture men in muddy clearings, cutting fiberglass and welding by hand under a tree canopy, hiding the work from satellites and planes. The boats weren't pretty, they were built to disappear. Today's narco subs are a strange mix of low-tech and smart design. Many are roughly 80 feet long and can go long distances on a single run. Some can travel underwater for long stretches without refueling. They carry up to 10 tons of drugs with small crews of 5 people squeezed into hot, dark spaces for days at a time. The price to build one, $1 to $2 million, is small compared to a single cargo's value of over $100 million. That math explains why traffickers keep making them. Smugglers have learned to make these subs hard to spot. They paint them in ocean colors. They shape them to cut the water with little wake. They add materials that lower heat signatures so aircraft with thermal cameras struggle to see them. Builders have even used lead or other tricks to hide heat, making planes and drones less able to pick them out. Those tricks make the subs hard to find, but they also bring new dangers. Many narco subs have scuttle systems, valves that flood the boat fast if capture seems likely. In minutes, the crew can sink the vessel and its cargo to the seafloor. When that happens in deep water, the drugs are often lost forever. Recovering a sunken sub from 1,000 or more feet down is next to impossible without special gear and huge budgets. Finding and stopping these subs means changing the game. Radar is not enough. Forces use sonar, magnetic detectors, long-range patrol aircraft, and tip-offs from human intelligence. Ships listen for odd sounds. Planes look for faint wakes or changes in sea color. Analysts stitch together signals from satellites, radios, and informants. It is a hunt that mixes science, patience, and luck. There is also a human cost. The crews who ride these subs live in hellish conditions: heat, damp, no fresh air, and a constant fear of drowning. Traffickers also force or trick locals into the work, turning desperate men into expendable riders on a death machine. Operation Orion in 2024 made it very clear. The narco-submarine threat was no longer local. When one of these subs was stopped on a run toward Australia, after a journey of more than 10,000 miles across the Pacific, the world could see the scale of the problem. This was not a one-off trick. It was proof that cartels had learned to build boats that could travel long distances and dodge normal checks. That changed the map. The fight at sea is a constant give and take. For every new trick the traffickers invent, law enforcement develops a counter. Thermal cameras hunt for faint heat. Long-range drones scan the horizon for odd wakes. Artificial intelligence sifts through oceans of data to spot patterns people might miss. Still, experts estimate that for every narco-submarine found, 3 or 4 slip past. That math shows the job is far from finished. That gap is exactly why Operation Martillo mattered. Launched in January 2012, its name, Hammer, fits the goal. It pulled nations together to hit cartels where they were strongest. Shipping routes. Ships, planes, and special teams patrolled the sea lanes from South America northward. The operation started small, but its tactics were smart. Teams cut larger patrols into tight patrol zones. Intelligence was shared in real time, and law enforcement inside the region could act faster because they were watching together. Martillo's early results were hard to ignore. Hundreds arrested, dozens of boats taken, and tons of cocaine off the water. Those numbers proved a basic truth. Cooperation works. If ships from different countries patrol the same seas and share what they see, smugglers lose the safe windows they once relied on. Operation Orion took that same idea and turned it up. By late 2024, 62 countries were on the same page. Small coast guards and big navies alike pushed assets into play. For 6 intense weeks, planes and ships searched, tracked, and boarded. The result was a record haul: 225 tons of cocaine in a single sweep, and more than 1,000 tons of marijuana and other drugs. A total street value the teams put at roughly $8.5 billion. Those numbers stunned many. They also rewired how the world looked at maritime drug trafficking. So what made Orion different? First, scale. More nations meant more eyes and more places to close down. Second, speed. Intelligence moved faster between partners, so forces could act before a suspect vanished. Third, tools. Satellites, patrol aircraft, sonar, long-endurance drones, and AI all combined to find things that would have been invisible a few years earlier. But big operations also reveal limits. Narco subs that sink themselves, remote jungle shipyards, deep water drops of cargo, those are hard to undo with a single mission. Cartel networks still have reach. Money moves fast, and corrupt points of contact can erode gains. And the human side is grim. Many crews on those subs are desperate people, sometimes forced or tricked into riding a death box across an ocean. Coastal communities that once saw smuggling as a living face growing danger when the cartels respond to pressure with violence and bribery. So what's next? The answer is not a single trick, but a long path. More tech, yes, but also better laws, faster courts, stronger anti-corruption work, and sustained international will. Recovering sunken submarines, following the money back to bank accounts and safe houses, and prosecuting the boss networks ashore all take time and money. Multinational operations like Martillo and Orion show that it can be done, and done at scale. They also show how the fight must keep evolving. They made Orion work by putting together pieces no single country could hold alone. The Americans brought satellite radar that could spot tiny wakes from space. The Dutch sent underwater drones to peer into hulls and scan below the waves. Colombian units, who know the jungle and river networks, found hidden launch sites in the places where subs and boats were built. Even landlocked nations helped, tracking money, phone calls, and shipping papers. Each partner gave one thing the others needed. Put together, those things became a force few smugglers could match. What set Orion apart was how fast and how clean the sharing was. Command centers worked around the clock, with officers from many nations side by side. Live feeds, maps, and chatter moved between them in real time. If a smuggler tried to change course after a tip, they often sailed right into someone else's patrol box. It was like closing doors on a hallway, where one gap opened, another shut. The seizures did more than stop dozens of shipments. Every arrest and every seized phone or laptop told a story. Analysts rebuilt route maps, linked names, and found inland contacts. The street price of cocaine climbed because the supply got thinner. That price rise hit the cartel's bottom lines, and money, more than sailors, matters most to these groups. To keep moving drugs, traffickers lean on two main tools: go-fasts and narco-subs. The go-fasts are the simple, brutal answer to speed and stealth. Picture a 30-foot boat with 3 or 4 outboard engines, each like a sports car motor. Those engines push the boat past 80 miles per hour. Painted dark to hide in the sea, stripped down to hold fuel and drugs, a go-fast carries one driver and as much cargo as it can. Extra tanks mean it can run 500 miles or more without stopping. The design is old, the same idea used by rum runners in the Prohibition era, but updated with modern motors and GPS. Catching a go-fast on the open water is almost impossible if you only have surface ships. That's where Hit Run comes in. These Coast Guard helicopter teams fly MH-65 Dolphins armed with rifles and trained marksmen. Instead of chasing, they fly over and tell the boat to stop. If it keeps running, Hetron snipers aim for the engines, not people, and put the boat out of action. The engines die. The chase ends. Boarding teams then move in to secure the crew and the drugs. But the traffickers keep changing. When speedboats become too risky, they turn to subs and semi-submersibles. When radar gets better, they paint hulls to blend with the sea or add materials to hide heat. When satellites watch the surface, they try to stage moves at night or use motherships that carry smaller runners far out to sea before dropping them off. So the answer is never just one tool. Orion showed that you need many tools used together: planes, ships, helicopters, underwater drones, satellites, money tracking, and fast legal moves. It also showed that a shared plan is stronger than solo effort. The cartels can still find gaps, but filling one hole often opens another. That's why the best defense is constant pressure. Keep the patrols active, keep the intelligence flowing, and keep the legal and financial levers engaged. The cartels thought they could outsmart the world's navies by blending in and slipping under the radar. Literally. Go fast disguised as fishing boats, fake nets piled on deck, even bogus crew uniforms. Some had hidden compartments below the waterline, perfect for stashing bales of cocaine, where a quick inspection would reveal nothing but empty space. Then came the low-profile vessels, part speedboat, part submarine. They barely break the water's surface, with just enough above for air intakes and a small cockpit. Painted the same blue as the open ocean, they're nearly invisible to the naked eye and hard for radar to pick up. Slower than a go-fast but harder to find, they became the new favorite for smugglers. But what the cartels didn't count on was running into the USCGC James, one of the most advanced cutters the U.S. Coast Guard has ever deployed. The James is not just a ship, it's a floating command center, a tracker, and a hunter all in one. First, size matters. At 418 feet long, the James has the endurance to stay at sea for up to 60 days without refueling. That means it can patrol far out in the Pacific or Atlantic, waiting patiently while smugglers think they've escaped. Smaller patrol boats have to return to port much sooner, leaving gaps the traffickers could exploit. Second, the James carries an entire surveillance arsenal. It has high-powered radar that can track small wakes miles away, thermal cameras that pick up heat signatures from engines, even those hidden below decks, and drones that can be launched directly from the ship. These drones can fly ahead, scan suspicious boats, and send a live video back to the crew. Third, the James doesn't hunt alone. It carries its own MH-65 Dolphin helicopter and boarding teams ready to move at a moment's notice. If radar spots a suspicious blip, the helicopter can be airborne in minutes. The speed and range of the Dolphin mean it can catch a go-fast before it ever gets close to its destination. Then there's the boarding crew. These aren't just sailors, they're trained for high-risk interdictions. Fast, armed, and coordinated, they can intercept a target by small boat, helicopter drop, or both at once. And because the James is part of a vast international network like Operation Orion, it can call in help from Allied ships or planes in nearby waters. The James also has another edge: data fusion. It takes satellite information, intelligence from other countries, and real-time sensor readings, and blends them into a single, constantly updated picture of the surrounding seas. That means when a smuggler switches routes, the James already knows and is waiting,